You know that moment when everything you thought you knew about love just crumbles? When the person you'd give everything for looks you dead in the eye and says those words that change everything forever? I'm Michael, and this is the story of how one conversation destroyed my world, but also set me free in ways I never expected. If you're someone who's ever wondered whether love is really enough to keep two people together, well, stick around. Because what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about relationships. It was a Tuesday evening in our small apartment in downtown Chicago. Sarah was sitting on our old couch, the one we'd bought together at that thrift store on Michigan Avenue 2 years ago. You know, the one where we'd laughed about having no money but being rich in love? Yeah, that couch. Now it felt like a courtroom bench. "Michael," she said, her voice carrying that tone I'd learned to fear. The tone that meant serious conversation, the tone that meant my heart was about to break. "We need to talk." I set down my coffee mug, the one Emily had given me for my birthday with "World's Best Brother" written on it, and turned to face her. Sarah's blonde hair was perfectly styled even at 8 p.m. because that's just who she was, always put together, always beautiful, always just a little out of my league. "What's on your mind?" I asked, though I could feel it coming. You know that feeling, right, when you can sense the storm before the first raindrop falls? She took a deep breath, the kind people take before they jump off a cliff. "I've been thinking about us, about our relationship, about our future." My stomach dropped. We've all been there, haven't we? When someone starts a conversation like that, you know it's not going to end with planning a vacation. And, I managed to ask, "I don't think love is enough anymore, Michael." Those 7 words, 7 simple words that felt like a sledgehammer to my chest. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to say she was joking, but Sarah never joked about serious things. That was one of the things I loved about her, her honesty, even when it was killing me. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what she meant. "I mean, we love each other, we really do, but love isn't paying our bills, love isn't getting us a house in Lincoln Park, love isn't giving us the life I thought we'd have by now." She paused, looking at our tiny apartment with its peeling wallpaper and the radiator that only worked half the time. "We're both 28, Michael. We're not college kids anymore playing house." I nodded slowly. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to be realistic about what we want from life, about what I want from life." There it was, the truth we'd both been dancing around for months. I looked at her, this beautiful woman who'd somehow chosen me 3 years ago, and I realized she was right. Love wasn't enough, not for her, not for the life she deserved. "You're right," I said quietly. She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. What? "You're right. Love isn't enough." I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the small velvet box I'd been carrying around for 2 weeks, the ring I'd spent 3 months saving for, the ring I'd bought after working double shifts at the marketing firm just to afford. "You deserve more than I can give you." Sarah's face softened, and for a moment, I saw the girl I'd fallen in love with in college, the one who used to steal my hoodies and make terrible jokes about my messy hair. "Michael, I didn't mean..." "No, you're absolutely right." I stood up, still feeling that ring box burning a hole in my pocket. "You deserve someone who can give you everything you want, the house, the cars, the life you dreamed about." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. "So what does this mean for us?" I looked at her one last time, memorizing the way the lamplight caught her eyes, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. "I think you already know." And that's when I walked away. Just like that. No fighting, no begging, no dramatic speeches about how we could make it work. Because sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, you have to believe them. But this was just the beginning of a story that would turn my entire world upside down. Let me tell you something about growing up as a middle child in the Johnson family. You learn to fly under the radar, to be the peacemaker, to make everyone else's problems more important than your own. That's just who I became. Michael Johnson, the guy who always puts everyone else first. My mom, Mrs. Johnson, is the kind of woman who still makes Sunday dinner for whoever shows up. Even now, at 55, she works as a nurse at Northwestern Memorial and somehow still finds energy to worry about all 3 of her kids. She's got that maternal instinct that makes her text you at random times asking if you've eaten, if you're getting enough sleep, if you're happy. The happiness question had gotten harder to answer lately. Then there's Emily, my younger sister, 24 years old and still believes in fairy tales. She works at a bookstore in Wicker Park and writes poetry in her spare time. You know those people who still see magic in the world? That's Emily. She's the kind of person who cries at commercials and believes every love story deserves a happy ending. And then there's David. David is 30, 2 years older than me, and everything I'm not. Where I'm steady and reliable, David is charismatic and spontaneous. Where I work in marketing and drive a 10-year-old Honda, David owns 3 restaurants and drives a BMW. Where I struggled to save for a modest engagement ring, David throws money around like confetti. The thing about David is that people are drawn to him. He's got this magnetic personality that makes everyone want to be his friend. Growing up, he was the star athlete, the class president, the guy everyone wanted to sit with at lunch. Me? I was just David's little brother. But here's what I never told anyone, not even Emily. David has a way of making you feel small without even trying. It's not that he's mean, he's not. He's actually incredibly generous. He paid for Mom's car when hers broke down. He helped Emily with her college tuition. He's always offering to help with money, which somehow makes it worse, because every offer comes with this look. This subtle reminder that he's the successful one, the one who figured it all out, the one who can afford to be generous. After Sarah and I broke up, I found myself spending more time at Mom's house in Rogers Park. It's a small brick house with a front porch that needs painting and a kitchen that smells like the cookies she's always baking for someone. "You look thin," was the first thing Mom said when I showed up that Thursday evening. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" That's Mom for you. Every problem can be solved with food and enough love. "I eat, Mom, I'm fine." "No, you're not fine. Emily told me about you and Sarah." She guided me to the kitchen table, the same one where she'd helped me with homework 20 years ago. "Sit, I'll make you a sandwich." Emily appeared in the doorway like she had some kind of sibling radar. "I brought ice cream," she announced, holding up a pint of Ben Jerry's. "And tissues. And that rom-com you hate but secretly love." "I don't secretly love The Notebook," I protested. "Everyone secretly loves The Notebook," Emily said, settling into the chair across from me. "It's scientifically impossible not to cry when what? When the rich guy gets the girl because he has money?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Emily and Mom exchanged a look. "You know that look siblings give each other when they're worried about you? Yeah, that one." "Michael," Mom said gently, setting a turkey sandwich in front of me. "What happened with Sarah?" I took a bite, buying myself time. "How do you explain to your mother that your girlfriend basically told you that you're not good enough? That love doesn't matter if you can't provide the lifestyle she wants?" "She said love wasn't enough," I finally said. "And what did you say?" Emily asked softly. I agreed with her. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom stopped cutting vegetables, Emily stopped opening the ice cream, and for a moment, the only sound was the old clock on the wall, ticking away the seconds. "You agreed with her?" Mom's voice was carefully controlled. "She was right, Mom. I can't give her the life she wants. I work in marketing at a firm that barely pays me enough to afford my apartment. She comes from money, she's used to nice things, nice places, nice experiences. What can I offer her? A life of budgeting and bargain shopping and worrying about rent?" Emily reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "You can offer her love, Michael, real, honest, devoted love. That's worth more than any amount of money." I smiled sadly at my little sister, this beautiful girl who still believed in happy endings. "Is it though? Is love really enough when you can't afford to take your girlfriend on a proper vacation, when you have to save for months just to take her to a nice restaurant, when you see her looking at her friends' engagement rings and you know yours doesn't measure up?" "The right person won't care about any of that," Mom said firmly. "Maybe Sarah isn't the right person then." Just then, the front door opened and David's voice filled the house. "Where's my favorite family?" Emily rolled her eyes. "In here, being dramatic about love and money." David appeared in the kitchen doorway, all 6'2" of him, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and that $1 million smile. "Did someone say love and money? My two favorite topics." He ruffled Emily's hair and kissed Mom's cheek before turning to me. "Michael, I heard about the breakup. Sorry, man. But hey, now you're free to find someone who appreciates what you have to offer. There it was, that subtle implication that I had something to offer, delivered with just enough doubt to make you question it. Thanks, I said. Actually, I might be able to help with that, David continued, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. I've got this friend, Jessica, beautiful girl, works in finance. I was thinking maybe. I'm good, I interrupted. Thanks, but I'm not ready to date anyone. David shrugged. Suit yourself, but don't wait too long, brother. Good women don't stay single forever. He left soon after, heading to some business dinner with some important client. The house felt quieter without his presence, but also somehow lighter. You know, Emily said after he was gone, David means well, but he doesn't understand what it's like to be normal people with normal jobs and normal problems. Mom nodded. Your brother David lives in a different world. Success came easy to him, but that doesn't make his way the only way, or even the right way. I appreciated their support, I really did, but as I drove home that night to my empty apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe David was right, maybe I needed to face the facts about who I was and what I could realistically offer someone. What I didn't know was that everything I thought I understood about my family, about David, about my own worth, was about to be turned completely upside down. Little did Michael know what was coming. If you want to understand Sarah Williams, you have to understand the world she came from, and trust me, it's a world I never quite fit into, no matter how hard I tried. Sarah grew up in Kenilworth, one of those North Shore suburbs where the houses have circular driveways and the families have country club memberships. Her father, Mr. Williams, owns a chain of luxury hotels across the Midwest. Her mother died when Sarah was 12, leaving behind a trust fund and a legacy of charity galas and social expectations. I met Sarah during our junior year at Northwestern University. I was there on a partial scholarship, working 2 part-time jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't. She was there because it was expected. Northwestern was where Williams women went to get their degrees before marrying someone suitable and maintaining the family's social standing. But Sarah was different from what I expected from a rich girl. She worked hard in her classes, she was kind to everyone, and she had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she was talking to you. When she chose me, regular, middle-class, scholarship kid me, I felt like I'd won the lottery. For 3 years, I thought we were building something real together. Something that transcended the difference in our backgrounds. I was wrong. The first time I met Mr. Williams was at Sarah's graduation. He was exactly what you'd expect, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and a handshake that could crush bones. He looked at me the way you might look at a stray dog that followed you home, not necessarily with malice, but with the clear understanding that this was temporary. So you're Michael, he said, and somehow made my own name sound like a disappointment. Yes, sir, nice to meet you. Sarah tells me you're in marketing. Yes, sir, I work for Peterson Associates. We handle brand strategy for. I see. He turned back to Sarah before I could finish. Darling, your Aunt Catherine is asking for you. That was it. Our entire relationship summed up in 10 seconds of polite dismissal. But Sarah defended me, always. Don't mind Dad, she'd say. He's just protective, he'll warm up to you. 3 years later, I was still waiting for that warming up to happen. Sarah's best friend Jessica wasn't much better. Jessica Chen was everything Sarah was, beautiful, wealthy, connected, but with none of Sarah's kindness. She worked in investment banking and never let you forget it. She was the type of person who would ask what you did for work and then immediately lose interest when you told her. I don't understand what Sarah sees in him, I overheard Jessica saying at Sarah's birthday party last year. They were in the kitchen of Sarah's Lincoln Park apartment, the one her father paid for, and I was coming back from the bathroom when I heard my name. Michael's sweet, Sarah had replied, but even I could hear the lack of conviction in her voice. Sweet doesn't pay for vacations to Europe, Sarah. Sweet doesn't get you into the good restaurants. Sweet doesn't get you a ring from Tiffany's. Not everything is about money, Jess. Easy to say when you have it. I stood in that hallway for 5 minutes, listening to my girlfriend's best friend tear apart our relationship while Sarah offered increasingly weak defenses. That should have been my first real clue about where things were heading. But I loved her, so I ignored it. I ignored a lot of things. I ignored the way she'd get quiet when her friends talked about their boyfriends' jobs. I ignored how she'd light up when David showed up to family dinners, asking him about his restaurants and his investments like he was some kind of celebrity. I ignored the way she'd browse real estate websites, looking at houses in Winnetka and Lake Forest that cost more than I'd make in 10 years. Most of all, I ignored the growing gap between the life she wanted and the life I could give her. Sarah wasn't a bad person, she never was. She was caught between two worlds, the world she grew up in and the world she thought she wanted with me. For a while, I think she genuinely believed love would be enough. That we could make it work through sheer force of caring about each other. But love doesn't pay for the wedding she'd been dreaming about since she was a little girl. Love doesn't buy the house in the suburbs with the good school district. Love doesn't maintain the lifestyle she'd always known. And somewhere along the way, Sarah realized that choosing me meant choosing a smaller life. A life of budgets and compromises and explaining to her father why she settled for less than she deserved. The night she told me love wasn't enough, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: relief. Relief that she was finally saying what we'd both been thinking. Relief that she didn't have to pretend anymore that my love could make up for everything I couldn't provide. "I do love you, Michael," she said after our breakup conversation wound down. "I hope you know that. I love you so much, and that's what makes this so hard." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "I love you too, enough to want you to be happy, even if it's not with me." She cried then, real tears that told me this wasn't easy for her either, but we both knew it was the right decision. We were heading in different directions, toward different versions of happiness, and trying to force it was only going to make us both miserable. After she moved out, back to her apartment that Daddy was still paying for, I found myself thinking about those overheard conversations, those subtle looks, those moments when I'd felt like an outsider in my own relationship. Sarah wasn't wrong about love not being enough, she just wasn't right about why. Because here's what I was starting to understand: it wasn't that love isn't enough. It's that love without respect isn't enough. Love without seeing a future together isn't enough. Love without genuinely wanting the same things isn't enough. Sarah loved me the way you love a pet or a hobby, something sweet and comforting that makes you feel good about yourself, but not something you build your life around. And I had loved her the way you love a dream, something beautiful and perfect that you're always afraid of waking up from. Neither of those are real love. Real love is messier and more complicated and, yes, sometimes harder to maintain. But it's also stronger. It doesn't crumble the first time money becomes an issue, or when families disapprove, or when life gets difficult. I was beginning to understand that Sarah and I had never really had that kind of love. We'd had infatuation, attraction, affection, hope, but not the kind of love that builds lasting relationships. But Sarah had a secret she hadn't told me, a secret that would change everything I thought I knew about our relationship, about love, about money, and about the choices people make when they're caught between different worlds. Let me tell you about family dynamics, because if you've ever been the middle child, you'll understand what I'm about to say. There's always that one sibling who can do no wrong, who makes success look effortless, who seems to have been born with some kind of magic that makes everything work out for them. In the Johnson family, that person was David. Growing up, David was the kid other parents used as an example. "Why can't you be more like the Johnson boy?" they'd say to their own children. David played varsity football and baseball, maintained a 4.0 GPA, got into Northwestern on a full scholarship, and graduated summa cum laude with a business degree. Me, I was the kid who played JV soccer for 2 years and spent most of high school trying not to be noticed. I got decent grades, went to a state school, and took 5 years to graduate because I had to work part-time to afford it. Emily was the baby, the creative one, the dreamer. She got a pass on not being David because she was the artist, the sensitive one, the one who was never expected to conquer the business world. But me? I was stuck in the middle, always being compared to David's achievements, always falling short. Don't get me wrong, David never made me feel bad about it, not directly. He was actually incredibly supportive in his own way. When I graduated college, he threw me a party. When I got my job at Peterson Associates, he took me out for drinks to celebrate. When I was trying to save money for Sarah's engagement ring, he offered to lend me whatever I needed. That was David's thing. Always offering to help, always being generous, always making sure you knew he had more than enough to spare. "Michael, you don't have to struggle like this," he'd say whenever I mentioned money being tight. "I'm doing well. Let me help you out." And every offer, no matter how well-intentioned, felt like a reminder of the gap between us. The Sunday after Sarah and I broke up, Mom insisted on having everyone over for dinner. "Family dinner will cheer you up," she said, like a pot roast and mashed potatoes could cure heartbreak. David showed up 15 minutes late, as always, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing Mom on the cheek. "Had a meeting with investors. They want to open 2 more locations by next summer." Emily rolled her eyes. "Let me guess. They're throwing money at you and begging you to take it?" "Something like that," David grinned, completely missing the sarcasm in Emily's voice. We sat around the dining room table, the same one where we'd eaten every Sunday dinner since I was 5 years old. Mom had made her famous pot roast, Emily had brought some kind of experimental dessert from the bakery where she worked part-time, and David had brought stories about his latest business triumph. "So Michael," David said, cutting into his meat, "I've been thinking about your situation." "My situation?" "The breakup, being single again, starting over." He waved his fork in my direction. "I think this could be a good thing for you, a chance to reassess what you want out of life." I took a sip of beer. "Thanks for the pep talk." "No, I'm serious. Look, Sarah was great, but maybe she wasn't right for you. Maybe you need someone who appreciates what you bring to the table." "And what exactly do I bring to the table?" The question came out more bitter than I'd intended. David paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Come on, don't be like that. You're smart, you're funny, you're a good guy. Any woman would be lucky to have you. Just not Sarah, apparently." "Sarah comes from money," Mom interjected. "Sometimes people from that world have different priorities." "What Mom's trying to say," David said, "is that Sarah was probably looking for someone who could match her lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you either." Emily set down her water glass harder than necessary. "Are we seriously going to sit here and act like Michael wasn't good enough for Sarah because he doesn't drive a BMW? "That's not what I'm saying," David replied calmly. "I'm saying that compatibility involves more than just love. It involves shared goals, shared expectations about the future." "Like what kind of expectations?" I asked. David gestured around Mom's modest dining room. "Look, this is going to sound harsh, but Sarah's used to a certain standard of living: country clubs, nice vacations, designer clothes, expensive restaurants. That's not superficial, that's just how she was raised. If you can't provide that lifestyle, or at least work toward it, then maybe you weren't compatible long term." "So you're saying I should have tried harder to make more money?" "I'm saying maybe you should consider what you really want out of life. Are you happy where you are professionally? Are you challenging yourself? Are you growing?" There it was. The subtle implication that I wasn't living up to my potential, delivered with a concerned older brother expression. "I like my job," I said. "I'm good at it. I make decent money." "Decent money doesn't get you the girl," David said with a laugh. "Trust me, I've been there." Emily suddenly stood up. "Excuse me, I need some air." She walked out to the back porch and I could see her through the window, pacing back and forth with her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling her boyfriend to complain about David's advice. "She's sensitive about this stuff," David said, watching Emily through the window. "She still believes in fairy tales." "Maybe fairy tales aren't such a bad thing," Mom said quietly. "Maybe not, but they don't pay the bills." David turned back to me. "Look, Michael, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to help you see that you have options. You could come work for me. I'm expanding, I need good people, and you've got marketing experience. I could pay you twice what you're making now." And there it was, the offer I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. Working for David would solve all my financial problems. I could afford a better apartment, a better car, better everything. I could probably win Sarah back if I wanted to. I could finally be the kind of man who didn't have to save for months to buy an engagement ring. But I'd also be David's little brother forever. The one who needed rescuing. The one who couldn't make it on his own. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. "But I think I need to figure this out on my own." David nodded, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Not disappointment that I'd turned him down, but disappointment that I was too proud to accept help when I clearly needed it. After dinner, I helped Mom clear the table while David made phone calls about some business emergency. Emily came back inside but was unusually quiet, just picking at her experimental dessert and checking her phone. "You okay?" I asked her while we loaded the dishwasher. I just hate when he does that, she said. Does what? Acts like you're not successful enough, like you need to be fixed or improved or managed. She handed me a plate to rinse. You have a good job, you're responsible, you're kind, you're reliable. When did those things stop being enough? When Sarah decided they weren't enough, I guess. Emily was quiet for a moment, then said, Michael, can I tell you something? Sure. I never really liked Sarah. I stopped rinsing the plate. What? I mean, she was nice enough, but I don't know. She always seemed like she was waiting for something better to come along, like you were a placeholder until she figured out what she really wanted. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because you were happy, or at least, you seemed happy. And I wanted you to be happy. She took the plate from me and dried it with a dish towel. But maybe this breakup is a blessing in disguise. Maybe now you can find someone who actually deserves you. I hugged my little sister, grateful for her unconditional support even when it came with a side of delusion about my dating prospects. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about David's offer. Part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I was being too proud. Maybe I should take the job, make more money, prove that I could provide the kind of life Sarah wanted. But another part of me, the part that was tired of always being the little brother who needed help, wanted to prove that I could make it on my own, that I was worth more than David's charity or Sarah's settling. What I didn't know was that everything I thought I understood about David, about success, about what it meant to make it on your own, was about to be completely upended. Then David entered the picture in a way I never saw coming. You know how sometimes you think you have someone figured out, and then one little thing happens that makes you question everything you thought you knew. That's what happened 3 weeks after Sarah and I broke up, when I discovered something about David that changed everything. It started with a phone call from Emily on a Thursday afternoon. I was at work, trying to focus on a campaign for a local restaurant chain, when my phone buzzed. Michael, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Emily's voice had that serious tone that immediately put me on edge. What's wrong? It's about David and Sarah. My stomach dropped. What about them? I saw them together yesterday, at Gibson's Bar Steakhouse. It looked like a date, Michael. They were sitting close, laughing, and he was holding her hand. The world went sideways for a moment. I gripped my phone tighter. Are you sure? I'm positive. I was there with Jake for his birthday dinner and I saw them at a corner table. They didn't see me, but Michael, it definitely wasn't just a friendly catch-up. I stared at my computer screen, the restaurant marketing campaign suddenly meaningless. How long were they there? The whole time we were there, about 2 hours. And Michael? She paused, like she was debating whether to tell me the rest. What? When they left, he kissed her, not like a friend. Like how you used to kiss her. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My brother was dating my ex-girlfriend. My brother, who had offered me a job out of pity, who had spent years subtly making me feel inferior, was now with the woman who had told me I wasn't enough for her. Michael, are you there? Yeah, I managed. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I didn't know if I should tell you, but I couldn't keep it to myself. You deserve to know. You did the rig 8 thing. Thanks for telling me. I hung up and sat in my cubicle, trying to process what I'd just learned. David and Sarah. It made a sick kind of sense, actually. She wanted someone successful, someone who could give her the lifestyle she was used to. David had money, charm, and everything I lacked. But the timing bothered me. How long had this been going on? Was this why Sarah had suddenly decided love wasn't enough? Had she already been thinking about David when she was telling me we didn't have a future together? I left work early, claiming I had a doctor's appointment, and drove around Chicago for 2 hours trying to clear my head. I ended up at Montrose Beach, sitting in my car and staring at Lake Michigan while trying to figure out how I felt about this betrayal. Angry, definitely. Hurt, absolutely. But there was something else too, something that felt almost like relief. Because if Sarah was with David now, it proved that I'd been right all along. It had never really been about love not being enough. It had been about me not being enough. And apparently, I hadn't been enough for either of them. I decided to confront David directly. I needed to hear it from him, needed to understand how long this had been going on, needed to know if my own brother had been playing games with my relationship. I drove to his restaurant in River North, the flagship location of his little empire. It was Thursday evening, prime dinner time, and the place was packed. I waited at the bar for 20 minutes before David appeared, looking surprised to see me. "Michael, what brings you here? Want to try the new seafood special?" "We need to talk," I said, privately. Something in my tone must have warned him because his smile faltered. "Sure, let's go to my office." His office was on the second floor, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. The kind of office that's grey, med success, that made you feel small just by sitting in it. I remained standing. "So," I said, cutting straight to the point, "how long have you been seeing Sarah?" David went very still. For a moment, he looked like he was going to deny it, then his shoulders sagged slightly. "How did you find out?" "Emily saw you at Gibson's yesterday, so I'll ask again, how long?" David moved to his desk and leaned against it, suddenly looking older than his 30 years. "About 2 weeks. 2 weeks after we broke up, or 2 weeks before?" "After," he said quickly. "Michael, I swear to you, nothing happened while you two were together." "But you knew her. You'd met her at family dinners, at Emily's birthday party, at Christmas." "Of course I knew her. She was your girlfriend. And you liked her." It wasn't a question, and David didn't treat it like one. "Yes, I liked her. But I never acted on it, never said anything, never did anything inappropriate while you were together." "But you wanted to." David was quiet for a long moment. "Yes." The honesty hit me harder than a lie would have. "So what happened? She calls you crying about the breakup and you swoop in to comfort her?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from childhood when he was trying to figure out how to explain something complicated. "She called me about a week after you two broke up. She was upset, confused, feeling guilty about what she'd said to you. She wanted to talk to someone who knew both of you, someone who could help her understand if she'd made the right decision." "And you helped her understand by asking her out?" "No." David's voice was sharp. "I listened to her. I told her that you were hurting, but that you'd be okay. I told her that if she wasn't sure about the breakup, she should talk to you directly. But she said it was too late for that. That she'd burned that bridge when she told you love wasn't enough. She said she could see in your eyes that you were that you'd given up on her." I thought about that night, about how I'd agreed with her so quickly, how I'd walked away without fighting for us. Maybe she was right about that. "So, then what happened?" "We kept talking. She was lonely, I was available. She's beautiful and smart, and we have things in common. It just developed naturally." "Things in common," I repeated. "Like what?" David looked uncomfortable. "We both understand what it's like to have expectations, to feel pressure to live up to a certain standard. Her father expects her to marry someone successful, someone who can maintain the family's social standing. My restaurants are doing well, I move in similar circles. You mean you both understand what it's like to have money? That's not fair. Isn't it?" I stepped closer to his desk. "Sarah told me love wasn't enough because I couldn't give her the lifestyle she wanted. 2 weeks later, she's dating my brother who can. How is that not exactly about money?" David was quiet for a moment, then said, "Michael, I didn't plan this. I didn't pursue her to hurt you or prove some point. It just happened." "Did you know she was going to break up with me?" "What?" "Before she did it. Did she talk to you about our relationship? Did she ask your advice?" David's hesitation was answer enough. "She did, didn't she?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "She talked to you about breaking up with me. She mentioned that she was having doubts about your future together, that she was worried about financial compatibility. And what did you tell her?" "I told her that relationships require more than just love, that practical considerations matter too." "You told her to break up with me." "I told her to be honest with herself about what she wanted out of life, which was to break up with me and date you instead." David stood up from his desk. "Michael, I know how this looks, but I never told her to break up with you. I never suggested she should be with me instead. I just told her that if she wasn't happy, if she felt like you two weren't compatible long term, then staying together wasn't fair to either of you. How convenient that you were there to comfort her after she took your advice." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, David? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing, it looks like my big brother saw something he wanted and found a way to get it." David was quiet for a long time, staring out his office window at the Chicago skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. You want to know the truth? Fine, I was attracted to Sarah from the moment you introduced her to us. She's beautiful, she's intelligent, she comes from a world I understand, and yes, part of me wondered what would have happened if I'd met her first. The honesty was brutal, but I appreciated it more than his earlier deflections. But, he continued, I never acted on those feelings, I never pursued her, I never tried to undermine your relationship. When she called me after the breakup, I was genuinely trying to help her process her feelings, not trying to win her over. But you ended up with her anyway. Yes, I did, and I'm not going to apologize for that, Michael. You two were over, she was single, I was single, and we connected. I'm sorry it hurts you, but I'm not sorry it happened. I stared at my brother, this man I'd looked up to and resented in equal measure my entire life, and realized that everything I thought I knew about our family dynamic was wrong. This wasn't about David being the golden child or me being the failure. This wasn't about success or money or living up to expectations. This was about David always getting what he wanted, Ted and me always settling for what was left over. You know what the worst part is? I said finally. What? You could have had any woman, you're successful, you're charming, you're everything women say they want, but you had to have the one woman who was mine. She was never really yours, Michael, David said quietly. If she had been, she wouldn't have left you for me. The words hit like a physical blow, partly because they were cruel, but mostly because they were true. I walked to his office door, then turned back. You're right about one thing, David. Sarah and I weren't meant to be together, but not for the reasons you think. What do you mean? I mean I deserved better than someone who could walk away from me without a fight, and she deserved better than someone who would settle for being with a woman who didn't really want him. I left David's restaurant that night feeling strangely cleansed. The betrayal hurt, but it also clarified something I'd been struggling with since the breakup. I hadn't lost the love of my life, I'd lost an illusion I'd been clinging to for 3 years. But I still had one more conversation to have, one more piece of the puzzle to put into place. This changed everything between them, and it was about to change everything for me too. Have you ever had one of those moments where you realize your entire family dynamic is built on lies everyone agrees to tell? That's what happened the weekend after I confronted David about Sarah. I was avoiding family dinners, avoiding David's calls, basically avoiding everyone while I tried to process the fact that my brother was dating my ex-girlfriend. But Emily wouldn't let me disappear that easily. You need to come to Mom's on Sunday, she said when she showed up at my apartment Saturday evening with takeout Chinese food and a determined expression. I'm not ready to sit around a table and pretend everything's normal. Good, because I don't want you to pretend everything's normal. I want you to hear what I have to say about our family, and I want you to hear it before you make any decisions about David's job offer, or Sarah, or any of the other stuff you're dealing with. Emily had brought enough food for 4 people, which was typical Emily behavior. She spread it out on my coffee table and started opening containers while I got us drinks. I talked to Mom after you confronted David, she said, settling onto my couch with a container of lo mein. You told Mom? She needed to know. And honestly, Michael, I think she was relieved that someone finally said something. What do you mean? Emily took a bite of noodles, clearly organizing her thoughts. Do you remember when we were kids, how David always got the bigger bedroom, the newer bike, the better Christmas presents? He was the oldest, that's normal. No, it's not to that extent. And do you remember how whenever you accomplished something, like when you made honor roll or when you got that scholarship to state, David always had a bigger accomplishment the same week? I frowned, trying to remember. Coincidence? Was it though? Remember when you got promoted to shift supervisor at that restaurant where you worked in college? The next day, David announced he was opening his second location. Remember when you got accepted to Northwestern for your master's program? 2 days later, David got that big write-up in Chicago Business Journal. The more she talked, the more the pattern became clear. David had a way of overshadowing everyone else's moments, often without seeming to do it deliberately. Emily, what are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that David has been competing with you your entire life, and you've been so busy trying to live up to him that you never noticed he was actually threatened by you. Threatened by me? That's ridiculous. Is it? Emily set down her food and turned to face me fully. Michael, you're 2 years younger than David, but you've always been the one people actually like. you're funnier, you're kinder, you're more genuine. David is successful, but he's also kind of intense. People respect him, but they don't necessarily enjoy being around him. I thought about David's friends, mostly business contacts and networking connections. He was invited to everything, but I couldn't think of anyone who would call him just to hang out. You know what Mom told me when I talked to her about David and Sarah? What? She said she's been worried about David for years, that his success came too easy, too fast, and that he never learned how to handle not getting what he wants. She said she's been watching him get more and more controlling about family dynamics, always needing to be the center of attention, always needing to be the one with the solutions to everyone's problems. That's just his personality. No, Michael, that's his insecurity. Think about it, every time you've had a girlfriend, what has David done? I thought back through my dating history. I don't know, what do you mean? He finds reasons to be around them. He charms them, he impresses them with his success, he makes them laugh. Remember Jessica from college? She spent half your graduation party talking to David about his restaurant ideas. Remember Melissa? She asked David for business advice and ended up having lunch with him twice. The pattern was becoming uncomfortable clear. You think he was trying to steal my girlfriends? I think he was proving to himself that he could. And I think Sarah was the first one who actually took the bait. I sat back on my couch, trying to process this new version of my family history. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need to understand that Sarah leaving you had nothing to do with you not being good enough, and everything to do with David being a manipulative older brother who can't stand the idea of you having something he doesn't have. But he has everything: the restaurants, the money, the success. He has external success, but you have something he's never been able to get, which is? People genuinely like you, Michael. You're authentic, you're kind without expecting anything in return. You build real relationships, not transactional ones. David might have more money, but you have more friends. You might not drive a BMW, but people actually enjoy spending time with you. Emily reached over and grabbed my hand. I've watched David my entire life, and I've never seen him have the kind of relationships you have, even with family. He loves us, but he doesn't really know us. He knows what we do, what we need, what problems he can solve for us, but he doesn't know who we are. That's not true. David knows me. Does he? When's the last time you two had a conversation that wasn't about your job, your money problems, or your dating life? When's the last time David asked you about your interests, your dreams, your thoughts on anything that didn't relate to fixing some problem in your life? I tried to think of an example and came up empty. He sees you as his project, Michael, his little brother. Who needs guidance and help and management. He doesn't see you as an equal, as someone who might have insights or ideas or value that doesn't come from external success. So what are you saying, that I should hate David? I'm saying you should stop letting him define your worth. I'm saying you should recognize that David taking Sarah wasn't about Sarah choosing someone better than you, it was about David proving he could take something that was yours. We ate in silence for a while, both of us processing the weight of what she'd said. Finally, Emily spoke again. There's something else you should know. What now? I did some digging about David's restaurants. You know how he's always talking about his investors, his expansion plans, his big success? Yeah? It's not as solid as he makes it seem. Jake knows someone who works in commercial real estate, and they told him that David's been struggling to secure financing for his expansion. The first 2 restaurants are profitable, but not as profitable as David claims. He's been putting on a show of success that's not entirely real. My head was spinning. What does that mean? It means David might not be the golden child success story we all thought he was. It means maybe he's just as insecure and struggling as the rest of us, but he's better at hiding it. Why would he lie about that? Because his entire identity is built on being the successful one, the one who has it all figured out, the one who can afford to be generous and offer help to everyone else. Emily paused. What happens to that identity if people find out he's actually struggling too? I thought about David's offer to give me a job, his casual mentions of money, his ability to always pick up the check at family dinners. Had it all been performance? Emily, how do you know all this? Because I've been watching our family dynamic for 24 years, and I've been getting increasingly uncomfortable with how everyone treats you, like you're the failure when you're actually the most well-adjusted person in this family. I don't feel well-adjusted. You have a job you like, friends who genuinely care about you, hobbies and interests beyond making money, and the ability to have real relationships with people. You're not perfect, but you're real. That's more than I can say for David. I leaned back against my couch cushions, feeling like someone had just reorganized my understanding of the past 30 years. So what do I do with all this information? You stop measuring yourself against David's version of success. You stop feeling like you need to be fixed or improved or managed. You start recognizing that you're already enough, exactly as you are. And Sarah? Sarah made her choice. She chose surface over substance, image over authenticity. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of her values. Emily stayed for another hour, and we talked through family memories with this new perspective. Stories I'd always interpreted as David being the favored child suddenly looked different when viewed as David being insecure and competitive. The golden boy image was starting to crack, and underneath it, I was seeing someone who might be just as lost and struggling as I was, but without the self-awareness to admit it. After Emily left, I sat in my apartment thinking about everything she'd said. Was it possible that I'd been viewing my own life through the wrong lens? That I'd been so focused on what I lacked compared to David, that I'd never appreciated what I actually had? My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Can we talk? I want to explain about Sarah." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the immediate urge to accommodate my older brother's needs. Instead, I turned off my phone and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow I was going to have to decide who I wanted to be, David's perpetually struggling little brother, or Michael Johnson, a man who was enough exactly as he was. But the worst was yet to come, because what I was about to discover would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free, sometimes it completely destroys the foundation of everything you thought you knew. That's what happened 2 days after my conversation with Emily, when I discovered the real reason Sarah had broken up with me. It started with a pocket. The pocket of my old leather jacket, the one I'd worn the night Sarah told me love wasn't enough. I was finally doing laundry, depression laundry, the kind where you wash everything you own because you've been avoiding it for weeks, when I reached into the jacket pocket to check for forgotten items. My fingers found the velvet ring box. I'd completely forgotten about it. The engagement ring I'd saved 3 months to buy, the ring I'd been carrying around for 2 weeks before our breakup, waiting for the right moment to propose, the ring that was supposed to represent our future together. I opened the box and stared at the modest diamond solitaire. It wasn't huge, I couldn't afford huge, but it was beautiful, classic, elegant, exactly the kind of ring Sarah had always said she wanted when we'd browsed jewelry stores together. Looking at it now, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the future that would never happen, relief that I hadn't proposed before she'd told me I wasn't enough for her. But as I was about to close the box and figure out how to return it, I noticed something. A small piece of paper, folded and tucked under the ring's cushion. I pulled it out, thinking it might be the receipt or warranty information. It wasn't. It was a note, in my own handwriting, that I'd completely forgotten about. A note I'd written to myself while sitting in the jewelry store, watching the salesperson polish Sarah's ring. She's going to say yes because she loves me, not because this ring is expensive enough. She's going to say yes because she wants to build a life with me, not because I can give her everything she wants. She's going to say yes because love really is enough, despite what everyone else thinks. Reading those words, written by a version of myself who still believed in fairy tales, broke something inside me, that Michael had been so hopeful, so certain that love could overcome practical concerns, so naive about what Sarah actually wanted from life. I was about to throw the note away when my phone rang. It was Jessica, Sarah's best friend, which was weird because Jessica had never called me, not once in the 3 years I'd known her. "Michael, hi, it's Jessica Chen." "Hi Jessica, what's up?" This is awkward, but I need to tell you something about Sarah, about why she really broke up with you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Can we meet? I'd rather talk about this in person." An hour later, I was sitting across from Jessica at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, watching her fidget with her Starbucks cup and wondering what could possibly be so important that Sarah's best friend, who had never liked me, felt compelled to reach out. "I probably shouldn't be doing this," Jessica said, "but my conscience has been eating me alive for the past month." "Jessica, what's going on?" She took a deep breath. Sarah didn't break up with you because love wasn't enough. Then why did she break up with me? Because her father gave her an ultimatum. The coffee shop suddenly felt too quiet, like all the background noise had been sucked away. What kind of ultimatum? Mr. Williams found out you were planning to propose. I don't know how, maybe Sarah mentioned it, maybe he had you investigated, I honestly don't know, but he knew and he wasn't happy about it. So he told Sarah that if she married you, he would cut her off completely. No more trust fund, no more help with rent, no more family money, and more than that, he said he would make sure you never got a decent job in Chicago again. He has connections everywhere, Michael. He could have made your life very difficult. I stared at Jessica, trying to process what she was telling me. She broke up with me to protect me? She broke up with you because she was trapped. Her father made it clear that being with you would hurt both of you financially, and Sarah, she couldn't handle the idea of giving up her lifestyle or watching you struggle because of her family's disapproval. But she said love wasn't enough. She said I couldn't give her the life she wanted. Jessica winced. She was lying, or at least, she was trying to convince herself she was telling the truth. It was easier for her to believe that she was being practical about money than to admit that she was choosing her father's approval over fighting for your relationship. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. How long have you known this? Since the day after she broke up with you. She called me crying, telling me what her father had said, how impossible the situation was. I told her she should tell you the truth, that you deserved to know what was really happening. But she didn't. No, she said it would be easier for both of you if you believed the breakup was about practical incompatibility rather than her family's interference. Easier for her, you mean? Jessica nodded sadly. Yes, easier for her. We sat in silence for a moment while I tried to reorganize 3 years of relationship history with this new information. Jessica, why are you telling me this now? Because Sarah started dating your brother and I realized she was making the same mistake all over again. What do you mean? David is successful enough to meet her father's approval, wealthy enough to maintain her lifestyle, connected enough to be acceptable to her social circle. But Michael, she doesn't love him the way she loved you. How do you know? Because I've seen her with both of you. With you, she was different. Softer, more genuine, more herself. With David, she's performing. She's playing the role of the successful businessman's girlfriend. Jessica leaned forward across the table. She made a choice based on fear and family pressure, and now she's stuck with the consequences. But you shouldn't be stuck with them too. What do you mean? I mean you shouldn't go through life thinking you weren't good enough for Sarah, when the truth is that Sarah wasn't brave enough to fight for you. The revelation was overwhelming. Everything I'd believed about our breakup, everything I'd internalized about my own worth, had been based on a lie Sarah told to make herself feel better about choosing security over love. Does David know? I asked. About her father's ultimatum? I doubt it. Sarah's not exactly going to lead with "I'm only dating you because my father approves of your net worth." But he knows she loved me. Of course he knows. Anyone with eyes could see how you two felt about each other. But David's not interested in emotional depth, he's interested in winning. And dating Sarah is definitely a win in his book. I thought about my conversation with David in his office, how he'd basically admitted to always wanting Sarah, how he'd been there to comfort her after the breakup he'd encouraged. The coffee shop suddenly felt too quiet, like all the background noise had been sucked away. What kind of ultimatum? Mr. Williams found out you were planning to propose. I don't know how, maybe Sarah mentioned it, maybe he had you investigated, I honestly don't know, but he knew and he wasn't happy about it. So he told Sarah that if she married you, he would cut her off completely. No more trust fund, no more help with rent, no more family money, and more than that, he said he would make sure you never got a decent job in Chicago again. He has connections everywhere, Michael. He could have made your life very difficult. I stared at Jessica, trying to process what she was telling me. She broke up with me to protect me? She broke up with you because she was trapped. Her father made it clear that being with you would hurt both of you financially, and Sarah, she couldn't handle the idea of giving up her lifestyle or watching you struggle because of her family's disapproval. But she said love wasn't enough. She said I couldn't give her the life she wanted. Jessica winced. She was lying. Or at least, she was trying to convince herself she was telling the truth. It was easier for her to believe that she was being practical about money than to admit that she was choosing her father's approval over fighting for your relationship. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. How long have you known this? Since the day after she broke up with you. She called me crying, telling me what her father had said, how impossible the situation was. I told her she should tell you the truth, that you deserved to know what was really happening. But she didn't. No, she said it would be easier for both of you if you believed the breakup was about practical incompatibility rather than her family's interference. Easier for her, you mean? Jessica nodded sadly. Yes, easier for her. We sat in silence for a moment while I tried to reorganize 3 years of relationship history with this new information. Jessica, why are you telling me this now? Because Sarah started dating your brother and I realized she was making the same mistake all over again. What do you mean? David is successful enough to meet her father's approval, wealthy enough to maintain her lifestyle, connected enough to be acceptable to her social circle. But Michael, she doesn't love him the way she loved you. How do you know? Because I've seen her with both of you. With you, she was different. Softer, more genuine, more herself. With David, she's performing. She's playing the role of the successful businessman's girlfriend. Jessica leaned forward across the table. She made a choice based on fear and family pressure, and now she's stuck with the consequences. But you shouldn't be stuck with them too. What do you mean? I mean you shouldn't go through life thinking you weren't good enough for Sarah, when the truth is that Sarah wasn't brave enough to fight for you. The revelation was overwhelming. Everything I'd believed about our breakup, everything I'd internalized about my own worth, had been based on a lie Sarah told to make herself feel better about choosing security over love. Does David know? I asked. About her father's ultimatum? I doubt it. Sarah's not exactly going to lead with "I'm only dating you because my father approves of your net worth." But he knows she loved me. Of course he knows. Anyone with eyes could see how you two felt about each other. But David's not interested in emotional depth, he's interested in winning. And dating Sarah is definitely a win in his book. I thought about my conversation with David in his office, how he'd basically admitted to always wanting Sarah, how he'd been there to comfort her after the breakup he'd encouraged. Jessica, there's something I need to ask you, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you think David knew about Mr. Williams's ultimatum before he started seeing Sarah? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, her face going through several different expressions. Why would you ask that? Because David gave Sarah advice before she broke up with me. He told her that relationships require more than love, that practical considerations matter, and then he was conveniently available to comfort her after she took his advice. You think David orchestrated the breakup? I think David might have known more about Sarah's family situation than he let on. Jessica set down her coffee cup and looked me directly in the eyes. Michael, I can't prove this, but yes, I think it's possible David knew about her father's disapproval. Sarah mentioned once that she'd talked to David about her family's expectations, about the pressure she felt to date someone appropriate. When was this? Months before you two broke up. She was stressed about how her father would react if you proposed, and she needed to talk to someone who understood both worlds, her world and yours. David was the obvious choice. The pieces were clicking into place, creating a picture that made me feel sick. So David knew Sarah was vulnerable about family pressure, and instead of encouraging her to stand up to her father or talk to me directly, he reinforced her doubts about our relationship. It looks that way. And then when she finally broke up with me, he was right there to offer comfort and a relationship her father would approve of. Michael. Jessica reached across the table and touched my hand. I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I pulled my hand away, not because I was angry at Jessica, but because I needed space to process the scope of this betrayal. My brother hadn't just ended up with my ex-girlfriend by coincidence. He'd actively undermined my relationship, taken advantage of Sarah's family pressure, and positioned himself as the solution to all her problems. And Sarah had let him. There's one more thing, Jessica said quietly. What? Sarah knows she made a mistake. She's miserable with David. She told me last week that she wishes she'd been braver, wishes she'd talked to you about her father's ultimatum instead of just giving up. But she's not going to do anything about it. No, she's in too deep now. Breaking up with David would mean admitting she made the wrong choice, and Sarah's not good at admitting she's wrong. I stood up from the coffee shop table, suddenly needing air, needing space, needing to get away from this conversation and all its implications. Jessica, thank you for telling me. I know this wasn't easy. Michael, what are you going to do? I looked at her, this woman who had never liked me but had cared enough to tell me the truth when it mattered. I'm going to do what I should have done weeks ago. I'm going to stop letting other people's choices define my worth. As I walked out of that coffee shop, I felt something I hadn't felt since the breakup. Clarity. Sarah hadn't left me because I wasn't enough. She'd left me because she wasn't brave enough to fight for us. David hadn't ended up with Sarah by accident. He'd manipulated the situation to get what he wanted, regardless of how it affected me. And I had spent weeks questioning my own value based on lies and manipulations and other people's cowardice. What Michael discovered next would shock him even more, because the truth about his family was darker than he'd ever imagined. You know that moment when you realize you have to choose between being comfortable and being honest, when you can either keep pretending everything is fine or blow up your entire world to get to the truth. I chose truth. After Jessica's revelation about Sarah's father and David's manipulation, I spent 2 days planning what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. I wasn't going to let emotion drive this conversation. I wasn't going to let David's charm or Sarah's tears or my own history of avoiding conflict derail me from getting answers. I decided to confront them together. If they were going to be together, they could face the consequences of how they'd gotten there together. I knew they had dinner plans at David's restaurant on Friday night. Emily had mentioned it during one of our daily check-in calls. So I waited in the parking lot until I saw Sarah's car pull up, watched her walk into the restaurant wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, watched David greet her with a kiss that should have been mine. I gave them 30 minutes to get settled, to order their wine, to get comfortable. Then I walked in. The hostess recognized me. I'd been there enough times over the years. Michael, are you meeting someone tonight? Yeah, I'm meeting my brother, David Johnson. He should have a table for 2. Of course, right this way. She led me through the crowded restaurant to a corner table where David and Sarah were sitting close together, her hand in his, both of them laughing about something. They looked up as I approached, and I watched the color drain from both their faces. Michael, David said, recovering quickly. What a surprise. Would you like to join us? Actually, yes, I would. I pulled out the empty chair and sat down before either of them could object. We need to talk. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mush, AL, maybe this isn't the best time. I think it's the perfect time. I looked directly at her. I had an interesting conversation with Jessica yesterday. Sarah went very still. David looked confused. What did Jessica tell you? Sarah asked quietly. She told me about your father's ultimatum, about how he threatened to cut you off and ruin my career if you married me, about how you broke up with me to protect both of us from his retaliation. David's confusion deepened. What ultimatum? Sarah closed her eyes. Michael, please don't do this here. No, I think David deserves to know the truth too. Don't you? I turned to my brother. You see, David, Sarah didn't break up with me because love wasn't enough. She broke up with me because her father gave her an ultimatum and she chose financial security over fighting for our relationship. Is that true? David asked Sarah. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him, then at me, then down at the table. Yes. But you told me you realized you and Michael weren't compatible long term. You said you wanted different things out of life. I lied. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I lied because it was easier than admitting I was choosing my family's approval over love. David leaned back in his chair, processing this information. So you never actually believed that love wasn't enough? No. I was trying to convince myself it was true so I could live with my decision. The silence at our table was deafening. Around us, the restaurant continued its Friday night bustle, people laughing, servers taking orders, the normal sounds of people enjoying their evening. But at our table, everything had stopped. David, I said, there's something else you should know. Michael, don't, Sarah said urgently. But I was done protecting people from the consequences of their own actions. Sarah told you about her father's ultimatum months before she broke up with me. She asked you for advice about what to do. David's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? Because Jessica told me, and because it explains why you were so quick to tell Sarah that relationships require more than love, that practical considerations matter. You weren't giving neutral advice, David. You were encouraging her to break up with me. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen? David looked at Sarah, who was staring at her hands, then back at me. Sarah came to me because she was stressed about her family situation. She needed someone to talk to who understood both worlds. And what did you tell her? I told her that family approval matters, that fighting against her father would be difficult for both of you, that she needed to think carefully about what she was willing to sacrifice for love. You told her to choose her family over me. I told her to be realistic about the challenges you'd face. Challenges you wouldn't face, right? Because you're successful enough to meet her father's approval. David was quiet for a moment. Yes. So when you were giving Sarah advice about our relationship, you already knew you could offer her an alternative that wouldn't require any sacrifice at all. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I leaned forward. You saw an opportunity to get something you wanted and you took it, regardless of how it would affect me. Sarah finally looked up. Michael, David didn't manipulate me. I made my own choices. Did you? Or did you make the choices that David and your father and Jessica and everyone else in your world encouraged you to make? That's not fair. What's not fair is spending 3 years building a relationship with someone, only to find out they were never really willing to fight for it when things got difficult. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but I found I didn't care anymore. I was done being responsible for other people's emotional comfort. Sarah, let me ask you something, I continued. If your father hadn't given you that ultimatum, would you have said yes if I'd proposed? She wiped her eyes with her napkin. Yes. And do you love David the way you loved me? David started to object, but I held up my hand. No, let her answer. Sarah looked at David, then at me. No. Then why are you with him? Because he's safe, because my father approves of him, because I don't have to choose between love and security with him. Because you don't love him enough to have to choose. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face now. David had been listening to this exchange with increasing discomfort. Sarah, is that really how you feel about us? David, I care about you, I do, but Michael's right, I'm with you because it's easy, not because I can't imagine my life without you. So I'm what, a consolation prize? You're the safe choice. The honesty was brutal, but it was also liberating. Finally, all of us were telling the truth instead of protecting each other's feelings. David, I said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. What? Did you know I was planning to propose to Sarah? David hesitated just long enough to answer my question. You did know, I said. How? Emily mentioned it. She was excited, she let it slip during a family dinner. So you knew I was going to propose, you knew Sarah was struggling with her father's ultimatum, and you decided to position yourself as the alternative. I didn't decide anything, I was available when she needed someone to talk to. Available and interested. Yes, available and interested. Michael, I'm not going to apologize for being attracted to Sarah or for caring about her when she was going through a difficult time. I'm not asking you to apologize for being attracted to her, I'm asking you to admit that you actively undermined my relationship to get what you wanted. David was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, tired, less defensive. You want me to admit that I saw an opportunity and took advantage of it? Fine, yes, I did. I wanted Sarah, I saw that she was unhappy and conflicted about your relationship, and I encouraged her doubts instead of encouraging her to fight for you. The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd known it was coming. Why? I asked. Because I was tired of watching you have something I wanted, because for once in our lives, I wanted to be the one who got the girl instead of watching you be happy with someone I couldn't have. You've always gotten everything, David, the success, the money, the family's admiration. But not the relationships, never the real relationships. David looked at Sarah, then back at me. You know what the difference is between us, Michael? People like you, really like you, they enjoy being around you, they trust you, they want to be your friend. With me, people are impressed, but they're not connected. So you decided to take the one person who was connected to me. I decided to take the one person who might choose me for reasons other than my money or my success. But she didn't choose you for those reasons, she chose you exactly because of your money and success. David looked at Sarah, who was still crying quietly. Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out. The three of us sat in silence, surrounded by the noise of the restaurant, each processing the weight of these revelations. Finally, Sarah spoke. "Michael, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry for lying to you, for taking the easy way out, for not fighting for us when I should have." "I'm sorry too," David said. "I'm sorry for manipulating the situation, for betraying your trust, for being the kind of brother who would sabotage your relationship to get what he wanted." I looked at both of them, these two people who had shaped so much of my adult life, who had made choices that had fundamentally changed my understanding of love and family and my own worth. "You know what the sad part is?" I said finally. "I would have understood if you'd just been honest with me from the beginning." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Sarah, if you'd told me about your father's ultimatum, we could have figured out a solution together. Maybe it would have been difficult, maybe we would have struggled financially, but at least we would have been fighting the same battle instead of fighting each other." "And David," I continued, "if you'd told me you had feelings for Sarah, if you'd been honest about wanting her instead of pretending to give neutral advice, I would have respected you more, even if I didn't like it." "Would you really?" David asked. "Yes, because honesty is brave, and what you both did was cowardice." I stood up from the table, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of this conversation. "Michael, where are you going?" Sarah asked. "I'm going home. You two can figure out what you want to do with your relationship, but I'm done being part of this drama." Are we okay?" David asked hesitantly. I looked at my brother, this man who had been such a huge part of my life, who had shaped so much of my understanding of success and worth and family dynamics. "I don't know, David. I honestly don't know." As I walked out of that restaurant, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: freedom. Freedom from the weight of other people's expectations, from the burden of trying to live up to standards that were never really about me in the first place. Then David revealed a truth that would change everything Michael thought he knew about his family. 3 days after our confrontation at the restaurant, David showed up at my apartment at 11 p.m. on a Monday night. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. "David, it's 11 o'clock. Please, Michael, there's something I need to tell you, and if I don't say it now, I never will." I let him in, partly because he looked so genuinely distraught and partly because I could smell alcohol on his breath and didn't want him driving home. "Are you drunk?" "Not drunk, just liquid courage." He sat heavily on my couch. "I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant, about honesty being brave and what I did being cowardice." "Okay. And you're right. But Michael, the cowardice goes deeper than just Sarah. There's something I've never told you, something I've never told anyone, and it's been eating me alive for years." I sat down across from him, suddenly alert. David wasn't prone to dramatic confessions, and the look on his face was unlike anything I'd ever seen from my usually composed older brother. "What is it?" David rubbed his hands over his face, a gesture I recognized from childhood when he was trying to work up the courage to tell Mom he'd broken something. "The restaurants aren't doing as well as I've been telling everyone. Emily mentioned something about that." "No, Michael, you don't understand. They're not just struggling, they're failing. I'm 3 months behind on rent for both locations, I owe suppliers over $40,000, and the bank is threatening to call in my loans." I stared at my brother, trying to process this information. "But you're always talking about expansion, about investors." "The expansion is a fantasy. The investors pulled out 6 months ago when they saw my real numbers. I've been living on credit cards and borrowed money, trying to keep up appearances while everything falls apart around me." "David, why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because my entire identity is built on being the successful one. I'm the brother who has it all figured out. I'm the one who offers to help everyone else with their money problems. What happens to that identity if people find out I'm actually broke?" The irony was staggering. While I'd been feeling inadequate about my modest but stable job, David had been drowning in debt and failure, putting on an elaborate performance of success. "How bad is it?" "Bad. I haven't taken a salary in 4 months. I've been borrowing money from the business account to pay my personal rent. Last week, I had to choose between paying my car payment and paying the restaurant's electricity bill." "Jesus, David. And the worst part? The absolute worst part is that I sabotaged your relationship with Sarah because I was jealous of your stability. Your boring, reliable, steady life that I've been mocking for years. I would kill for that right now." "What do you mean?" David looked at me with something that might have been admiration mixed with regret. Michael, you have a job that pays you regularly. You have savings. You can afford your rent without wondering if your credit cards will get declined. You have an actual sustainable life. But you always acted like my life was small, like I was settling for mediocrity. Because I was terrified that you were actually the smart one, that you'd figured out something I hadn't about building a real, sustainable life instead of chasing the illusion of wealth. I sat back in my chair, trying to reconcile this version of David with the successful older brother I'd known my entire life. David, how long has this been going on? The financial problems? About a year. But the fear, the insecurity, the constant feeling like I was one missed ache away from losing everything? That's been going on since I opened the first restaurant. Why didn't you ask for help? From who? Mom's a nurse, she doesn't have that kind of money. Emily works at a bookstore, and you? He paused, looking embarrassed. I'd spent so many years positioning myself as the successful one, the one who could afford to help everyone else, that I couldn't figure out how to admit I needed help. You could have told me. Could I have? Really? After years of subtle comments about your career choices, your apartment, your car, your ability to provide for Sarah, how do I go from that to, hey little brother, can you lend me money? The role reversal was almost too much to process. David, the golden child, was actually struggling more than any of us, and his fear of admitting that struggle had driven him to make increasingly desperate choices. Is that why you went after Sarah, because you thought dating her would somehow solve your financial problems? David was quiet for a long moment. Partly. Sarah comes from money, real money. Her father's hotels are worth millions. I thought if I could make that relationship work, maybe I could find a way to save the restaurants. Maybe Mr. Williams would invest, or Sarah would help, or I could at least maintain the appearance of success long enough to figure something out. David, that's not how relationships work. I know that. I knew it then too, but I was desperate. When you're drowning, you grab onto anything that might keep you afloat, even if it means pulling someone else under. So Sarah was never really about Sarah, she was about solving your money problems. No, that's not. It's more complicated than that. David ran his hands through his hair. I was attracted to Sarah, I genuinely enjoyed spending time with her, but you're right that the attraction was partly about what she represented. Financial security, social status, access to a world where my business problems might have solutions. And now? Now I realize that Sarah was attracted to me for the same reasons I was attracted to her. She thought I represented financial security and social status. We were both using each other to solve problems that relationships can't actually solve. What are you going to do? I'm going to close the restaurants, file for bankruptcy, start over. David looked at me with something that might have been relief. And I'm going to stop pretending to be someone I'm not. What about Sarah? Sarah and I broke up yesterday. Turns out when you take away the illusion of success and financial security, there's not much left between us. I wasn't surprised, but I was surprised by how little satisfaction I felt at hearing it. How did she take it? About as well as you'd expect. She accused me of deceiving her about my financial situation, which is fair. I accused her of only being interested in me for my money, which is also fair. We both realized we'd been using each other to avoid dealing with our real problems. And what are your real problems? David smiled sadly. I've spent so many years trying to be impressive that I forgot how to be genuine. I've been so focused on external success that I never developed any internal sense of worth, and I've been so competitive with you that I never learned how to be a real brother. The honesty was overwhelming. This was the most genuine conversation David and I had ever had, and it was happening because his carefully constructed life was falling apart. David, what can I do to help? You're already helping, by listening to me without judgment, by not saying I told you so, by treating me like a person instead of like the family disappointment I'm about to become. You're not going to be the family disappointment. Come on, Michael, when Mom finds out that her successful son is actually broke and has to file for bankruptcy, when Emily realizes that all those generous gestures were funded by credit cards and loans, when everyone realizes that David's success story was just an elaborate lie. They'll be disappointed that you didn't trust them enough to ask for help when you needed it, but they won't stop loving you. How can you be so sure? Because that's what family means. It means you're loved for who you are, not for what you achieve or how much money you make or how impressive your life looks from the outside. David was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay? Can you ever forgive me for what I did with Sarah, for undermining your relationship, for manipulating the situation, for being the kind of brother who would sabotage your happiness to get what he wanted? I thought about it for a moment, really thought about it. I can forgive you, I said finally. But David, you need to understand that our relationship is going to be different going forward. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done looking up to you as the successful older brother. I'm done measuring myself against your achievements. I'm done letting you make me feel small with your subtle comments and generous offers. I never meant to make you feel small. Maybe not consciously, but you did. And now that I know you were struggling too, now that I understand that the success I was comparing myself to wasn't even real, I realize how much energy I wasted feeling inadequate. David nodded. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are, and I forgive you. But David, if we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on honesty and equality, not on you being the successful one and me being the one who needs guidance. I don't know how to be anything other than the successful older brother. Then you're going to have to learn how to just be David, not successful David, not impressive David, not generous David, who has all the answers, just David, who's flawed and struggling and trying to figure things out like the rest of us. I don't know if I know how to do that. Then it's a good thing you have a family who can help you learn. We talked until almost 3 a.m. that night, and for the first time in our adult lives, we talked as equals. David told me about the stress of maintaining his facade, about the sleepless nights worrying about money, about the isolation of having to pretend everything was fine when his world was falling apart. I told him about the years of feeling inadequate, about questioning my own worth based on his apparent success, about the relief of finally understanding that his life wasn't as perfect as it had seemed. When David finally left that night, he looked different, still tired, still stressed about his financial situation, but somehow lighter. Like he'd been carrying a weight for so long that he'd forgotten how heavy it was until he finally put it down. As for me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, like I finally knew who my brother really was. Not the golden child, not the success story, not the one who had everything figured out, just David. Flawed, struggling, human David, who was finally ready to stop pretending to be perfect. But I still had one more conversation to have. One more person who needed to know the truth about what had really happened between Sarah and me. Michael couldn't believe what he heard, and what came next would change his perspective on everything. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by an emotional truck. Learning the truth about David's financial situation, about his motivations for pursuing Sarah, about the years of insecurity hidden behind his successful facade, it was like discovering that gravity worked differently than I'd always believed. But there was still one more conversation I needed to have, one more person who deserved to know the truth about what had really happened. I called Emily and asked her to meet me for breakfast. We met at Lou Mitchell's, this classic Chicago diner where we'd been going since we were kids. Emily was already there when I arrived, sitting in our usual booth with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "You look terrible," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Thanks, that's exactly what every man wants to hear first thing in the morning." "Michael, what's going on? Your text said you needed to talk about something important, and you sounded, I don't know, different." I ordered coffee and took a moment to figure out where to start. "How do you tell your little sister that everything she thought she knew about your family dynamics was wrong?" "Emily, I need to tell you some things about David and Sarah and our whole family situation, and some of it is going to be hard to hear." "Okay," she said carefully, "I'm listening." I started with Jessica's revelation about Sarah's father, about the ultimatum, about the real reason Sarah had broken up with me. Emily's face went through a range of emotions: surprise, anger, sadness, confusion. "So Sarah never actually believed that love wasn't enough?" Emily asked. "No, she was scared of her father's threats and didn't know how to fight them, so she convinced herself that our relationship was doomed anyway." That's awful, Michael. She should have told you the truth. You should have had a chance to face that challenge together." "Maybe. But Emily, there's more." I told her about David's role in encouraging Sarah's doubts, about his manipulation of the situation, about how he'd positioned himself as the solution to all of Sarah's problems. Emily's expression grew darker with each detail. That bastard, she said finally. I knew something was off about him suddenly being available to comfort Sarah right after she broke up with you, but I never imagined he'd actually sabotaged your relationship. There's more. More? How can there be more? I told her about David's visit the night before, about his financial problems, about the facade of success he'd been maintaining while his businesses crumbled around him. Emily sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing everything I'd told her. So let me get this straight, she said finally. Sarah broke up with you because she was afraid of her father, not because she didn't love you. David encouraged that breakup because he wanted Sarah for himself and thought she could solve his money problems, and David's entire success story has been a lie for the past year. That about sums it up. Jesus, Michael, our family is more screwed up than a daytime soap opera. Despite everything, I laughed. Yeah, pretty much. Emily was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee and thinking. You know what this means, don't you? What? It means you've been beating yourself up for months about not being good enough, when the truth is that you were the only one in this whole situation who was actually genuine. What do you mean? Sarah was performing the role of the dutiful daughter instead of being honest about what she wanted. David was performing the role of the successful businessman while hiding massive financial problems. But you, Michael, you were just, you. Honest about your feelings. Realistic about your limitations, genuine in your love for Sarah. And I still lost her. You lost an illusion. You lost someone who was too scared to fight for your relationship and too dishonest to tell you what was really happening. That's not actually a loss, Michael. That's a bullet dodged. Emily reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I'm proud of you. For what? For handling all of this with so much grace, for not letting David's betrayal turn you bitter, for not letting Sarah's lies make you question your own worth, for being the kind of person who can forgive even when forgiveness is hard. I don't feel graceful. I feel like I've been living in some kind of alternate reality for the past few months. Maybe you have been, but now you know the truth and you can make decisions based on reality instead of on other people's lies and performances. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course. Did you know about David's financial problems, I mean? You mentioned that your friend Jake had heard rumors. Emily looked uncomfortable. I suspected something was off. David's always been generous, but lately his generosity felt different, more desperate maybe, and some of the things he said about his expansion plans didn't quite add up. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought I might be wrong, and I didn't want to spread rumors about our brother's business, and honestly, because I was afraid that if David was struggling, it would somehow make your situation with Sarah worse. How do you mean? I thought if you found out that David was having money problems too, it might make you feel even more inadequate about your own financial situation. I was trying to protect you from feeling worse about yourself. Emily, that's really sweet, but you don't need to protect me from reality. I know, I'm learning that protecting people from the truth usually does more harm than good. We finished our breakfast and walked out into the Chicago morning, both of us processing the weight of everything that had been revealed over the past few days. Michael, what are you going to do now? Emily asked as we stood on the sidewalk outside the diner. What do you mean? I mean now that you know the truth about everything, now that you understand what really happened, what are you going to do with that information? I thought about it for a moment. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to stop defining myself in relation to David's success or Sarah's expectations or anyone else's version of what my life should look like. And David, are you going to help him with his financial problems? I'll be there for him as his brother, but I'm not going to rescue him. David needs to learn how to ask for help when he needs it, and he needs to learn how to build genuine relationships instead of transactional ones. And Sarah? Sarah made her choices. She chose security over love, her father's approval over fighting for what she wanted, the easy path over the honest one. I can forgive her for that, but I can't fix it for her. Emily hugged me, one of those long hugs that says everything words can't express. I love you, Michael. I'm sorry this has been so hard, but I'm glad you finally know the truth. I love you too, and Emily. Yeah? Thanks for being the one person in this family who's always been honest with me. Someone had to be. As I drove home from breakfast, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not David's inadequate little brother, not Sarah's disappointing ex-boyfriend, not the family member who couldn't quite measure up to expectations. Just Michael. Flawed, real, honest Michael, who was finally free from other people's lies and performances and manipulations. I had no idea what came next, but I knew it would be built on truth instead of illusion, on my own choices instead of other people's expectations, on who I actually was instead of who everyone else thought I should be. Everything Michael believed was a lie, and now he had to decide what kind of man he wanted to be moving forward. 2 weeks after learning the truth about David and Sarah, I found myself at a crossroads that would define the rest of my life. Funny how clarity can be both liberating and terrifying at the same time. I was sitting in my apartment on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee and staring at 3 things on my coffee table: the engagement ring I'd never given Sarah, a job offer from a company in Seattle, and David's latest text asking if we could talk. The job offer had come out of nowhere. A former colleague from Peterson Associates had moved to Seattle and recommended me for a senior marketing position at a tech startup. Better salary, better benefits, a chance to start over in a city where nobody knew my history with Sarah or my complicated family dynamics. The ring represented the past, 3 years of believing in a love that was never quite as real as I'd thought. David's text represented, well, I wasn't sure yet. The possibility of rebuilding our relationship on honest terms, or maybe just another chapter in our complicated family drama. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. It was Mom. "Michael, honey, can you come over for lunch today? There's something we need to discuss as a family." "What's going on?" David told me about his financial situation. "And about Sarah. We need to talk through some things together." An hour later, I was sitting around Mom's kitchen table with Emily and David, feeling like I was about to attend some kind of family intervention. David looked even worse than he had the night he'd confessed everything to me. Thinner, more haggard, like the weight of his lies had been physically crushing him. "So," Mom said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea, "David has told me about the restaurants, about the debt, about what happened with Sarah. And Emily filled me in on some of the family dynamics I apparently missed over the years." She looked around the table at her 3 children, her expression a mix of disappointment and determination. "I have some things to say, and I want all of you to listen." "Mom," David started. "No, David, you've been talking for years. Now it's my turn to talk, and your turn to listen." David fell silent. "First, David, I'm disappointed in you. Not because your businesses are failing. Businesses fail sometimes, that's just life. I'm disappointed because you lied to us for months, because you hurt your brother to get something you wanted, and because you've been so focused on appearing successful that you forgot how to be a good person." David flinched like he'd been slapped. "But," Mom continued, "I'm also proud of you for finally telling the truth, for admitting your mistakes, and for taking responsibility for your actions. That takes courage, and it's never too late to start acting with integrity." She turned to me. "Michael, I owe you an apology." "What for?" "For not seeing how David's behavior was affecting you, for not recognizing that his constant offers to help and subtle comments about your career were making you feel inadequate, for not protecting you from comparisons that were never fair to begin with." "Mom, you don't need to apologize." "Yes, I do. You've been the steady one, the reliable one, the one who never caused drama or demanded attention, and I took that for granted. I let David's flashier personality overshadow your quieter strengths, and that wasn't fair to you." She looked at Emily. "And Emily, I'm grateful to you for being honest about what you observed, for supporting your brothers when they needed it, and for having the courage to tell uncomfortable truths when they needed to be told." Mom sat back in her chair, looking at all 3 of us. "Now, here's what's going to happen. David, you're going to close the restaurants, file for bankruptcy if you need to, and start rebuilding your life on honest terms. No more lies, no more performances, no more pretending to be something you're not." "I know, Mom. I'm already working with a lawyer. I'm not finished. You're also going to figure out how to make amends to Michael for what you did, not with money or grand gestures, but with genuine changed behavior over time. Trust is rebuilt through actions, not words." David nodded. "Michael," Mom continued, "you need to decide what you want your life to look like going forward, not in reaction to David or Sarah or anyone else's expectations, but based on what genuinely makes you happy and fulfilled." She paused, looking directly at me. "Emily told me about the job offer in Seattle." "You told her?" I asked Emily. "I thought Mom should know you were considering leaving Chicago." "Are you?" Mom asked. "Considering it?" I looked around the table at my family, complicated, flawed, but ultimately loving. I don't know. Part of me thinks a fresh start might be good. New city, new job, no history to carry around. And the other part? The other part thinks running away from problems doesn't actually solve them. What problems are you running from? I thought about it for a moment. I guess I'm not running from problems. I'm running from disappointment. From the feeling that Chicago is full of reminders of how things didn't work out the way I hoped they would. Michael, Emily said softly, what if instead of seeing those reminders as disappointments, you saw them as proof that you survived something difficult and came out stronger? What do you mean? I mean you loved someone who wasn't brave enough to fight for that love, and you handled that with grace. You discovered that your brother had betrayed you, and you chose forgiveness over bitterness. You learned that your family dynamics were more complicated than you realized, and you used that knowledge to set healthier boundaries. Emily leaned forward. Those aren't failures, Michael. Those are victories. They're proof that you're the kind of person who can handle difficult situations with integrity. She's right, Mom said. Michael, you've always been my most resilient child. You bounce back from disappointments, you learn from difficult experiences, and you keep your heart open even when it's been hurt. Those are incredible strengths. I don't feel strong. I feel like I've been stumbling through the past few months trying to figure out what went wrong. What went wrong, David said quietly, is that people lied to you. Sarah lied about why she was breaking up with you. I lied about my motivations and my financial situation. You've been trying to solve problems based on false information. So what now? I asked. Now you make decisions based on the truth, Mom said. What do you want, Michael? Not what you think you should want, not what would make other people happy, but what do you actually want for your life? I sat in that kitchen, surrounded by my family, and really thought about the question. What did I want? I want to build something real, I said finally. Real relationships, real success, real happiness. Not the performance of those things, but the actual things. And can you do that in Chicago? Yeah, I think I can. What about Seattle? Seattle would be easier, but easier isn't necessarily better. I looked at David. I want to rebuild our relationship, but it has to be different going forward, equal, honest, no more big brother, little brother dynamic, where you're the successful one, and I'm the one who needs guidance. I want that too, David said. I'm just not sure I know how to be anything other than what I've always been. Then you'll learn. We both will. I turned to Emily. And I want to stop taking your emotional support for granted. You've been taking care of everyone else's feelings for years, and that's not fair to you. I don't mind. You should mind. You matter too, Emily. Your feelings, your needs, your dreams matter just as much as anyone else's. Finally, I looked at Mom. And I want to stop being the easy child, the one who never asks for anything, never demands attention, never causes problems. That's not actually healthy for anyone. Mom smiled. What would you ask for if you were going to start asking for things? More honest conversations like this one, more acknowledgement when I do well at something instead of it being overshadowed by David's achievements. More recognition that my quieter way of being successful is still success. You've got it, Mom said. All of it. As we sat around that table, having the most honest conversation our family had ever had, I realized something important. I didn't need to run away to Seattle to start over. I could start over right here, with the people who knew me best, building new relationships on the foundation of old ones. The truth hadn't destroyed my family, it had given us a chance to rebuild it better. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the engagement ring box. I set it on the table in the center of all of us. I need to let go of this, not just the ring, but what it represents. The idea that love means settling for someone who isn't brave enough to fight for you. The idea that I need to be someone different to be worthy of love. I looked around the table at my family. I'm ready to find out what real love looks like, the kind that doesn't crumble when things get difficult, the kind that's built on honesty instead of illusion. And if you don't find it, Emily asked, then I'll be happy with the love I already have, from you guys, from real friends, from myself. That's more than a lot of people get. David reached across the table and put his hand over mine. Michael, I'm sorry for all of it, and I'm grateful that you're giving me a chance to be a better brother. We're all going to be better, Mom said, starting now. That afternoon, I called the company in Seattle and turned down their job offer. Then I took the engagement ring to a jewelry store and traded it in toward a different kind of investment, a weekend trip to visit Emily at her new apartment, a nice dinner with Mom, and a small fund for helping David get back on his feet if he needed it. Not because I was required to help, but because I chose to. Michael had to choose, and what happened next would determine the course of his entire future. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, reviewing quarterly reports for Peterson Associates, when I looked up and saw Sarah walking toward my table. She looked different, still beautiful, but there was something softer about her, less polished, more genuine. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Michael, I was hoping I'd run into you eventually." "Sarah. Hi." I closed my laptop. "How are you?" "I'm better. Can I sit for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Of course." She sat down, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I heard about David, the restaurants, the bankruptcy. I'm sorry that happened. He's doing okay, working for someone else now, learning how to be an employee instead of a boss. It's been good for him, actually. And you too? We're rebuilding. It's slow, but it's honest. That makes it better than what we had before." Sarah nodded. "I wanted to talk to you about everything. About how things ended between us, about what happened afterward." "Sarah, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. I need to apologize, and I need you to understand some things." I waited. "I broke up with you for all the wrong reasons," she said. "I was scared of my father, scared of disappointing him, scared of having to choose between love and security, and instead of being honest with you about that fear, I convinced myself that practical concerns were more important than what we had together. I know. Jessica told me about your father's ultimatum." Sarah's eyes widened. "She did? Months ago, right after you started dating David. I'm sorry she had to be the one to tell you. I should have been honest from the beginning." "Why weren't you?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the Chicago street scene. "Because admitting that I was choosing my father's approval over fighting for you would have meant admitting that I wasn't as brave or independent as I thought I was. It was easier to tell myself that love wasn't enough than to admit that I wasn't strong enough to choose love over comfort. And David was safe. He represented everything my father wanted for me, everything I thought I was supposed to want. Being with him meant I didn't have to choose between love and security because I wasn't really in love with him. That must have been lonely." It was. I spent 6 months trying to convince myself that I was happy, that I'd made the right choice, that practical compatibility was more important than passion. But Michael, you can't build a real relationship on fear and compromise. I thought about the Sarah I'd known, the one who used to steal my hoodies and make terrible jokes about my messy hair. "What happened? Why did you and David break up?" "Because we both realized we were using each other to avoid dealing with our real problems. He needed someone who could potentially solve his financial difficulties, and I needed someone who could solve my family approval difficulties. Neither of us was really seeing the other person. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for someone else's expectations. I moved out of the apartment my father was paying for. I got a job at a nonprofit that helps low-income families with financial literacy. I'm learning how to make decisions based on what I actually want instead of what I think I should want." I looked at this woman I'd loved for 3 years, this woman who had broken my heart and taught me so much about what real love actually requires. "That sounds like a good start," I said. "Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay. Do you think, is there any chance that we could try again?" "Not now, not immediately, but someday when I've figured out how to be braver, how to fight for what I want instead of settling for what's safe." The question hung in the air between us, loaded with 3 years of history and 6 months of growth and change. "Sarah," I said gently, "I think the woman you're becoming sounds like someone who deserves a great love story, but I don't think that story is with me." Her face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Can I ask why?" "Because we're different people now than we were when we were together. You're learning how to be brave and independent and true to yourself, and I'm learning how to recognize when someone is genuinely committed to building something real with me versus when they're just trying to figure out their own issues." "You don't think I'm genuinely committed?" I think you're genuinely committed to becoming the kind of person who could be in a healthy relationship. But Sarah, I deserve to be with someone who already is that person, not someone who's still working toward becoming them. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. That's fair, and probably wise. It's not about you not being good enough, I continued. It's about us having different timing. You're at the beginning of figuring out who you are outside of other people's expectations. I'm ready to build something real with someone who's already done that work. Have you done that work? I'm doing it, every day, learning how to value myself based on my own standards instead of other people's approval. Learning how to set boundaries with family, learning how to recognize genuine love versus settling for someone who can't really see me. It sounds like you've grown a lot. We both have. And that's good. But Sarah, growth doesn't always mean growing back together. Sometimes it means growing in different directions. Sarah smiled sadly. I was afraid you'd say that, but I also hoped you would, because it means you're protecting yourself in ways you didn't used to. What do you mean? The Michael I dated would have said yes to trying again, would have been willing to wait for me to figure things out, would have put my needs ahead of his own clarity about what he wanted. The fact that you're not doing that tells me you've learned something important about your own worth. She was right. The old Michael would have jumped at the chance to get Sarah back, would have been willing to be her practice relationship while she figured out how to be brave. The new Michael knew he deserved more than that. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. I really do. I hope you do too. Sarah stood up to leave, then paused. Michael? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think the woman who ends up with you is going to be incredibly lucky. You're a good man. You always were, even when I was too scared to appreciate it properly. After she left, I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, thinking about how different that conversation had been from our breakup 6 months earlier. This time, there had been honesty instead of lies, respect instead of manipulation, clarity instead of confusion. This time, I'd been able to hear her apology without feeling the need to rescue her from her regret. This time, I'd been able to wish her well without wanting to be part of her journey. That evening, I had dinner with Emily and her boyfriend Jake. They were talking about moving in together, about the practical considerations and emotional readiness and all the conversations that healthy couples have when they're building something real together. What about you? Emily asked as we were walking back to their car. Any interesting dating prospects? Not yet, but I'm not worried about it. Really, a year ago you would have been panicking about being single. A year ago, I thought being single meant I was failing at life. Now I realize that being single means I have space to become the kind of person who can build a really great relationship when the right person comes along. And what kind of person is that? I thought about it as we walked through Lincoln Park, past couples holding hands and families walking dogs and all the normal life that happens when you're not constantly measuring yourself against other people's achievements. Someone who knows his own worth, someone who can be honest about what he wants and needs, someone who doesn't settle for less than real love just because real love is harder to find than convenient love. That sounds like a pretty good person to be. Yeah, I think it is. That night, I went home to my apartment, the same apartment where Sarah had told me love wasn't enough, where David had confessed his lies, where I'd spent months questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships and family and my own value. But it felt different now. It felt like home instead of like a place I was settling for. It felt like the beginning of something instead of like evidence of what I couldn't achieve. I made myself dinner, watched a movie, read a book, and went to bed feeling content in a way I hadn't felt since. Well, maybe ever. Not because my life was perfect, but because it was honest. Not because I had everything I wanted, but because I finally knew what I actually wanted instead of what I thought I should want. Not because love had been enough, but because I'd learned that real love, the kind worth waiting for, is more than enough. It's everything. What happened next would change Michael's life forever and show him what real love actually looks like. 1 year after Sarah told me love wasn't enough, I was standing in the checkout line at a bookstore in Wicker Park when the woman in front of me turned around. "Excuse me, are you buying that for yourself or as a gift?" She was pointing at the cookbook in my hands, The Art of Simple Cooking. "For myself," I said. "I'm trying to learn how to cook something more sophisticated than pasta and frozen vegetables." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that starts in someone's eyes and spreads to their whole face. "That's a great choice. Julia Child's recipes are forgiving for beginners but impressive enough to make you feel like a real chef. You cook? I'm a chef actually, well, a sous chef. I work at Alinea. She paused. Sorry, I know that sounds pretentious. I just get excited when I see people wanting to learn how to cook. Alinea, wow, that's like the most famous restaurant in Chicago. It's pretty intense, but I love it. There's something magical about creating something beautiful and delicious from basic ingredients. She extended her hand. I'm Rachel, by the way. Michael. We ended up talking for another 20 minutes in that bookstore, about cooking and books and Chicago neighborhoods and the weird satisfaction of learning new skills as an adult. Rachel was funny and passionate and completely unpretentious despite working at one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. She was also beautiful, but in a different way than Sarah had been. Where Sarah's beauty was polished and intentional, Rachel's was natural and warm. She had dark curly hair that looked like she'd been running her hands through it, brown eyes that crinkled when she laughed, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. Can I ask you something? She said as we were walking out of the bookstore together. Sure. Would you like to be my guinea pig? Your what? I'm working on some new recipes for a potential cookbook, nothing too fancy, just elevated comfort food. But I need people to test them on, and most of my friends are other chefs who give me overly technical feedback. You want me to be your food tester? I want you to be my normal person food tester. Someone who can tell me if a recipe is actually approachable for home cooks or if I'm being too chefy about it. I looked at this woman I'd known for 30 minutes, who was offering to cook for me in exchange for honest feedback, and realized this was the first time in a year that someone had asked me for something I could actually give. I would love that. Great, are you free Saturday evening? That Saturday, I showed up at Rachel's apartment in Pilsen with a bottle of wine and no expectations beyond eating good food and helping someone with their cookbook project. Her apartment was small but perfectly organized, with herbs growing on the windowsill and cookbooks stacked on every available surface. The kitchen was clearly the heart of the space, professional-grade knives, a well-seasoned cast-iron collection, and the kind of spice rack that tells you someone takes cooking seriously. Welcome to my test kitchen, Rachel said, tying an apron around her waist. Tonight's menu is elevated mac and cheese, brown butter Brussels sprouts, and if we're still standing after all that, chocolate pâte de crème for dessert. That sounds incredible. That sounds like carbs and more carbs, but sometimes, that's exactly what you need. I opened the wine while Rachel started cooking, and we fell into an easy conversation about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up in a big Italian family where everyone cooked, about working her way up in professional kitchens, about the dream of someday opening her own restaurant that said on making fine dining techniques accessible to regular people. I told her about my work in marketing, about my complicated family dynamics, about learning to cook as a way of taking care of myself instead of always eating takeout. Can I ask you something personal? Rachel said as she was stirring cheese into pasta. Sure. You seem like someone who's been through something difficult recently, not in a broken way, but in a, I've learned some hard lessons and come out stronger way. I was surprised by her perceptiveness. What makes you say that? It's the way you talk about things, like you've thought carefully about what you want out of life instead of just accepting what other people think you should want. That's actually really accurate. Want to talk about it? So I told her. Not everything, but the broad strokes. About Sarah, about thinking love wasn't enough, about discovering that the real problem was never about love but about honesty and courage and being willing to fight for what matters. Rachel listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions, offering perspective without trying to fix anything. It sounds like you learned something important, she said as we sat down to eat. Which is? That love is enough, but only if it's real love. The kind that includes honesty and respect and partnership. The kind where both people are willing to choose each other every day, even when it's difficult. Exactly. And it sounds like you're ready for that kind of love now. I think I am. What about you? What's your story? Rachel smiled. My story is that I've been so focused on my career for the past 5 years that I forgot to focus on building a personal life. I've been successful professionally, but I've been living like my work was enough to make me happy. And is it? It's fulfilling, but it's not complete. I want to share the things I'm passionate about with someone who gets excited about them too. I want to cook for someone I care about, not just for restaurant customers. Is that what this is? I asked, gesturing at the incredible meal she'd prepared. Cooking for someone you care about? Maybe. Is that okay? I looked across the table at this woman who had somehow created the most delicious mac and cheese I'd ever eaten, who had listened to my story without trying to fix me, who was asking if it was okay that she might be starting to care about me. That's more than okay. We finished dinner and moved to her couch with the chocolate pot de crème, continuing to talk until almost midnight. About books and travel and family and dreams and all the things you discover about someone when you're genuinely curious about who they are. When it was time for me to leave, Rachel walked me to the door. Michael, I had a really good time tonight. So did I. The food was incredible, by the way. Your cookbook is going to be amazing. Thanks, but I wasn't just talking about the food. Neither was I. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed me, soft and sweet and without any agenda beyond wanting to kiss me. Would you like to do this again? She asked. I would love to do this again. Over the next few months, Rachel and I fell into something that felt entirely different from any relationship I'd ever had. We cooked together, explored Chicago neighborhoods, read books and talked about them, met each other's friends and families. There was no drama, no games, no wondering where we stood or what the other person was thinking. Rachel was direct about her feelings, honest about her needs, clear about what she wanted from life and from a relationship. When she got offered a better position at another restaurant, she talked to me about it before making the decision, not because she needed my permission, but because she wanted my input as someone who cared about her happiness. When I was struggling with a difficult project at work, she listened without trying to solve it for me, offered support without taking over, believed in my ability to figure it out while being there if I needed to talk through options. When we had our first disagreement, about whether to spend Thanksgiving with her family or mine, we talked through it like adults, found a compromise that worked for both of us, and moved forward without resentment or scorekeeping. This is weird, I told Emily over lunch one day, about 6 months into dating Rachel. What's weird? How easy this is. How uncomplicated. With Sarah, everything was drama and uncertainty and wondering if we were really compatible. With Rachel, it just works. Maybe that's what healthy relationships are supposed to feel like. Really? Not like constant work and struggle and fighting for each other? Emily laughed. Michael, fighting for each other doesn't mean fighting with each other. It means choosing each other consistently, supporting each other's goals, being honest even when it's difficult. It sounds like that's exactly what you and Rachel are doing. It sounds too good to be true. Or maybe it sounds like what you deserve after learning how to recognize real love instead of settling for less. 8 months after meeting Rachel in that bookstore, I was helping her prepare for a dinner party at her apartment when she said something that stopped me in my tracks. Michael, I love you. I looked up from the vegetables I was chopping. I love you too. I know this might sound crazy, but I think I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I set down my knife and turned to face her fully. That doesn't sound crazy at all. Really? Really? Rachel, what we have. This is what I was looking for without knowing how to recognize it. This is what real love feels like. What does real love feel like? I thought about it for a moment, trying to put into words something that felt almost too good to be true. It feels like coming home. It feels like being seen and appreciated for who I actually am, instead of who someone thinks I should be. It feels like building something together instead of competing or keeping score or trying to fix each other. It feels like choice, Rachel added, like we keep choosing each other every day, not because we have to or because we're afraid of being alone, but because we genuinely want to be together. Exactly. That night, as we were cleaning up after our dinner party, I realized something profound. Love actually is enough, but only when it's real love, built on honesty and respect and genuine partnership. Only when both people are brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to be independent, and committed enough to choose each other through difficulties. Sarah had been wrong when she said love wasn't enough, but she'd also been right in a way. The kind of love we'd had, based on hope and attraction and trying to be who we thought the other person wanted, that kind of love isn't enough. But real love, the kind that includes friendship and respect and shared values and mutual support, the kind where both people see each other clearly and choose each other anyway. That kind of love is more than enough, it's everything. A year later, I proposed to Rachel in her kitchen while she was making dinner. Not because I felt like I should, not because I was afraid of losing her, but because I couldn't imagine building my life with anyone else. She said yes, and then she cried, and then she made me taste the sauce she was working on, because even in emotional moments, Rachel is still a chef. Is it good? She asked, wiping her eyes. It's perfect, I said, and I wasn't just talking about the sauce. As for Sarah, I heard through Emily that she'd moved to San Francisco, started her own nonprofit, and was dating a social worker who shared her passion for helping low-income families. She'd learned how to be brave, how to choose love over security, how to fight for what mattered to her. David slowly rebuilt his life and his relationships with the family. He started working for someone else's restaurant, learned how to be part of a team instead of always being the leader, discovered that success doesn't have to be measured in ownership and profit margins. He's dating someone now too, a teacher who likes him for his humor and kindness, not for his business achievements. And me? I'm planning a wedding with a woman who loves me exactly as I am, building a life based on truth instead of illusion, surrounded by family who finally understand that love, really is enough. But only when it's real.